Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Cheryl Elston. Today marks the 80th anniversary of the sinking of the second, third Australian hospital ship, Centaur. The Merchant Navy vessel was attacked at 4 a.m. on the 14th of May 1943, while on her second run from Sydney to Port Moresby. The freshly painted white hull was illuminated by powerful spotlights, and clearly visible around the hull was a thick green band, broken in several places by large red crosses. While most people were asleep, a torpedo from a Japanese submarine struck Centaur's port side, hitting the oil fuel tank, which ignited in a massive explosion. Many of those not killed in the explosion or resulting fire were trapped as the ship started to go down, bow first, and then broke in two. In just 3 minutes, Centaur was gone. Of the 332 people on board, including the civilian crew and medical personnel, only 64 survived. The following afternoon, an American destroyer, USS Mugford, assisted in recovering survivors. The loss of the Centaur deeply shocked Australia. The Centaur came to symbolise the courage of Australian women in war, and importantly, she also became a symbol of the determination to win the war. The wreck of the Centaur was not found until late 2009, some 66 years after its sinking, lying at a depth of more than 2,000 metres off the southern tip of Moreton Island in southeast Queensland. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. We warmly welcome the family of Private Clement Edward Lynne, who lost his life during the sinking of the Australian hospital ship Centaur. His story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Clement Edward Lynne. Clement Lynne was born on the 24th of May 1906 in Bathurst, New South Wales, the eldest son of Herbert and Elizabeth Lynne. Young Clement grew up in Bathurst, where he attended school at St Patrick's. He had a younger brother, Paul, and two sisters, Irene and Avis. Clement went on to gain an apprenticeship as a hairdresser with Mr. R.P. Campbell in Bathurst, with whom he worked for 9 years. He then moved to Sydney to continue his career. When Lynne was 25 years old, he was charged with having used a tobacconist shop in Arden Street, Coogee, for the purposes of betting and was fined £50. In 1930, he married Hazel Geddes, who died in 1936. Clement Lynne enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 16th of June 1940 at the age of 34. He began training and in November transferred to the newly raised 2nd 12th Field Ambulance, part of the Australian Army Medical Corps. With a headquarters and 2 deployable companies, the 2nd 12th Field Ambulance consisted of 12 officers and 250 soldiers, attached to the 23rd Infantry Brigade to provide medical support, including battlefield casualty collection and initial wound treatment. After carrying out basic training at Cowra, Lynne and his unit set off for Darwin in March. During their training in the Northern Territory, the men provided medical support and participated in construction of 5 small medical hospitals and assisted sappers and pioneer assault units, earning the unit the nickname the 2nd 12th Pioneers. In June, Lynne was charged with conduct to the prejudice of good order and military discipline and was fined again. After the start of the Pacific War, members of the 2nd 12th were attached to the Gulf Force and Sparrow Force and sent to defend the islands of Ambon and Timor respectively. A grim future lay ahead for them. Of all the members of the 2nd 12th serving with Gulf Force were captured or killed by the Japanese on the 1st of February 1942, with many dying as prisoners of war on Ambon or Hainan. Many of those who had joined Sparrow Force were also captured. Lynne, however, was present during the numerous Japanese bombing attacks on Darwin during the first half of 1942. After being relieved by the 2nd 13th Field Ambulance, the 2nd 12th travelled to Wollongong and took on more personnel to bring it up to full strength. Finally, the unit was ready to deploy overseas, and in early May 1943, 3 companies of the 2nd 12th Field Ambulance took the train to Sydney, boarding the hospital ship HMAS Centaur on the 11th of May at Darling Harbour. Lynne and around 200 members of the 2nd 12th were to be transported to New Guinea to relieve the 3rd Field Ambulance in Port Moresby. At 4 a.m. on the 14th of May 1943, Centaur was torpedoed by the Japanese submarine I-177 and sank in less than 3 minutes. Of the 332 people aboard, there were only 64 survivors, including 15 members of the 2nd 12th. It was 13 hours before they were rescued by the USS Mugford. Among the dead was Private Clement Lynne, who was believed to have drowned. During 6 years of service, over 200 members of the 2nd 12th Field Ambulance were killed, the highest figure for a non-combatant unit in Australian history. While the unit would go on to deploy personnel in support of Australian combat operation against the Japanese on Ambon, Timor and in Borneo, the majority of casualties were suffered during the sinking of Centaur. Today, Clement Lynne is commemorated in the Sydney Memorial in the grounds of the Rookwood Necropolis, alongside men of the Australian Army, the Royal Australian Air Force and the Australian Merchant Navy who lost their lives in the Southwest Pacific area during the Second World War. and who have no known grave. His name is listed on the roll of honour on my right, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Clement Edward Lynne, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.